morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you tune it in. This is your host, Terrell Simmons, and welcome to another episode of Rise Urban Nation. So look, we about to have a really good time today. My sister, Chloe, is in the building, and we've been vibing out before we hit record. We got like a million stories that we done told about growing up Nigerian. That should be actually a show that I think about it, growing up Nigerian.
As soon as you said it, I was like, wait, the best title of like a new release series on like Hulu or something ever. I would watch that show. Everyone would watch that show. Growing Up Nigerian? Yeah. I'd watch it.
Because what I noticed every time I meet a fellow Nigerian, we got stories for days about growing up with our parents and what that was like.
Yes, and every Nigerian child's story is the same. There's always the you're okay. So you have three options in your life, right? You grow up to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer,
yes.
Right? And and like you try to be like the good filial child, and like at some point you like start off and you're like, yeah, I guess I could try to do something that's kind of closely related to something that might make me happy. But then if you're one of those like rebel children, which unfortunately Nigerian parents have all the time, you'll go off into something weird like entrepreneurship or finance, and they'll be like, wait. Hold, wait. What are you doing? Excuse. Beg your pardon, madam. Where are you going? Why are you running? Come back.
And I was that rebel child. Like in high school, I did like art, and I remember taking art classes, and oh, that was like the worst thing you could do. My friend, I will. What are you doing? How are you going to make money and pay your bills with a picture? Please, my friend, this rubbish. Go to your books.
Oh my God.
It was such a fight. Oh they got me out of the art. That's for sure. It was just too much of a fight. I was like, okay, I do not love this enough to go through this.
That's the thing. And that's the thing that like, this is going to come full circle at some point. But like, if you're going to do something that's not one of the three, make sure it is something that you love. And I think it's the same with entrepreneurship. If you're going to do something that's not like the typical 9 to 5, make sure it's something you love for like very similar reasons. But yeah, I had a similar start. I was like that weird artsy child who drew pictures and wrote stories and like was in plays and stuff. And like they entertained it for like a little bit when I was younger, because they're like, oh, we'll make her well-rounded. You know, the Ivies love that. Yeah. And but eventually my parents were like, no, but okay, you gotta buckle down and like pick one of the three, you know, like pick one. And when I eventually was sort of like, no, I think I'm gonna do something that's like more social science-y, humanities, like, you want to kill me. You want to kill me? Is it that social science will pay your bills, will feed you food, take care for your children, care for my grandchildren? You know, like just so there's a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure when you have fresh immigrant Nigerian parents who, of course, they just want the best for you, right? And like they're leaving like a really established community behind. They're coming to this new place and they have to start from the bottom. And so like they want you to shortcut to your success as soon as possible. So like I get it. I'm not saying that I don't get it, but also I will never not make fun of my Nigerian family. Like I'll never not make fun of them.
I tell people all the time, it's just because, you know, especially immigrant Nigerian parents, that they believe wholeheartedly this is the best way, that this is the only way, and they've never seen anything else, and so that's why they come from that mentality. Bless their heart, they want the best for us. But there's the flip side of that, what we were talking about. Once you become successful, when they see there's a different way, they're like, wait, my son, my son, the HR director of what is his son? Diversity, equity, inclusion. That is my chief, big chief.
Big
You
chief,
had a similar
big
experience,
chief.
right?
I've absolutely gotten that. Big chief, the great one, the chosen one, right? And like this is hilarious, right? Because I have two younger brothers. I'm the oldest child, right? So like that on top of being like Nigerian kid, right? Immigrant kid in America. On top of that, I'm like the oldest. So like they had to like work out all the kinks with me. Like there was so much they didn't know. And so they, as soon as, and this is the story that I was telling you earlier, as soon as they saw that I was making real money, they were like, okay. Wait. How much? You bet how much? In what time? And so the story was that my family and I were like sitting for like a group prayer type thing. We like every Sunday or as often as we can, we'll meet like online and like do like a family prayer thing. You know how Nigerian church goes. It goes a long time, but we do it because we want to stay connected. And my youngest brother, my kid brother, is like straight on that like typical Nigerian path, right? He studied biomedical engineering in undergrad. He went to NIH and had a fellowship. And now he's like at Stanford doing like MD, PhD type thing. Like he's crazy, right? And so my parents are sort of like, you know, great one, chosen one, how are things? Good, lovely. And then they turn to me and they're like, how are you doing? What's happening in your life? In your business? What is it that you do? What's that thing? And so I said, I work with brands. And actually I just had a contract come through for like, 20, 30K. And it's great. It's like a month of my life that I get that much money for. And they were sort of like, how? And my kid brother is like, that's more than I make in a year. What? And so ever since then, my parents have been like, have you seen my daughter? She's doing really, really well. She's doing extremely well.
What's up, the son? Well, the son is doing well.
The son, he's fine. But have you seen my daughter? She's doing quite well. And so that's how you know you've arrived, when the Nigerian parents will start to brag about you. I will no longer like surreptitiously be like, well, she's doing fine. She's living her life. Now they start to brag about you and bring you up in conversations. That's how you know you've won. That's how you know.
Conversations that like nobody was even mentioning you were talking about you. It's like, you should hear about how did we get from there? We were talking about what we're going to eat, and now you're talking about like what my body is like.
No, but that's exactly right, though. They'll be like in prayer time or something with like their prayer group, or they'll be, I don't know, taking care of a patient or something. And like midway through the conversation, it'll be like, well, have you heard about my daughter? She's doing real well. Meanwhile, they're like, I don't, ma'am, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but,
I don't really know you like that.
You know what I do love now, something that we were talking about earlier, is like, how now the tides have changed a little bit, and your parents start to reflect with you because they start to question their journey in life, and like they do a lot of like questioning, like, so what do you think of this, and like, and now that they see like, oh, you have a career that you love and you make money, like how does that work? Because I tell them I often do speeches too as well to folks about career. And the one thing I always tell them is like, do what you love what you do. Don't chase the money. Let the money chase you. And what I mean by that is when you commit, a life of service to your passion, your purpose, and what you love, you do it to a degree that nobody can do it. And so you add another layer of value, which then becomes sought after, right? Because you could solve or fix a problem that nobody else can in a way that you is uniquely gifted to your gift and talents.
Exactly.
And people will pay top dollar to get that commodity because they can't get it anywhere else.
Exactly. Absolutely. And it's funny because right. So like both of my parents are in the medical field, right? Like that's the one of the three that they chose, right? Yeah. My mom runs her own practice, right? And so she's always seen herself as a doctor, as a physician, right? Mm-hmm. But I remember we were having a conversation about like just the two of us about like life and like choices that led us to where we currently are. And just sort of like out of the blue, I was like, yeah, but mom, like you're you're an entrepreneur, like you're a small business owner. Like that's what you are. Like, it's not really a surprise that I ended up being one too. And I remember her just sort of going, huh, right? Like having that realization, right? Like realizing that even in like the one that she chose, she was still a little bit off the beaten path, and like what that meant for her and how she approached her work going forward. So yeah, I've had like really interesting conversations with my parents ever since they've sort of grown to accept that, like, oh, like, no, but this is a real thing, right?
Yeah.
As soon as that happened and we started talking about where we are, where we've been, and what that means for where we're trying to get to, I started to get to know them better. So yeah, I started to get to know them better. And crazy that I'm advising them on stuff now. Like that's always been weird to me, but like I'm like an advisor to them as well. And I don't know, that just makes me real proud.
I mean, you know, it's only right that you advise. I mean, you're a brand scientist and advisor. You're a conflict mediator, you know. So, and you tackling bias and branding and removing barriers. So it's only, I mean, it's not too far off that you're advising them in these things. It's not too off the beaten path.
Thank you. No, that's true. I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. But it's also just the fact that like this is a thing that I created, right? Like I made this. I put this together out of all my weird interests. And now it's a thing, right? So that's amazing to me.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That is amazing. So this will probably be the longest dialogue into the intro, because people probably like, who is this Chloe? So for the people who don't know you, please tell the people, who is Chloe?
So that's such a hard question, but I think I would say Chloe is a nerd, philosopher, and Renaissance woman. And if I had to tell you about what I do, right, which is usually what people mean when they ask that question, I would tell them that I am an advisor. I advise people and organizations who are pursuing social progress, pushing the status quo. And my job is to make sure that their brands are impossible to ignore. That's what I do all day, every day. Eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, study all the things that like can make that possible. And I do that from a scientific perspective, right? So like I use science to make my choices. And I also do it from an equity lens. And like, we can get into how all of that became a thing, but like, but I've combined those two sort of perspectives, or those two parts of my life, to develop this really, how do I even put this? Well, I developed a diagnostic tool. Let's put it that way. I developed like a proprietary diagnostic tool that lets me assess brands. And once we've done that assessment, we can figure out, okay, you want a brand that's impossible to ignore? Here are the things that you and your brand specifically need to refine or improve in order to get there. Scientifically, this is scientifically what defines a brand that's impossible to ignore. So here are the steps that gets you, not this other guy, not the brand over there, but you to that point. So yeah, that's.
I love that. I tell people like, look, men lie, women lie, numbers don't.
Yes. Thank you. Man after my own heart, literally, literally. And so, and the reason that like the data and the science are so important to me, right? Like the reason that I lean really heavily into them, even though like, if you look at my background, that's not like necessarily where you expected it to go, right? I kind of went like a whoop, right type thing. The reason it's so important to me is because of who in particular I'm working with, right? I'm working with people who are trying to push the status quo, right? Who are trying to make the world a better place, right? And that's especially folks who are from I'd call them historically underrecognized communities or historically underestimated communities, right? The tools that have been developed around brands and branding and marketing and advertising and all the rest of it were developed for a very specific kind of enterprise. And those tools did not take into consideration implicit bias. They didn't take into consideration the fact that social change is a completely different beast. As opposed to like just the pursuit of profit, right? When you are pursuing social change and well-resourced social change, right? That's an entirely different beast altogether. And it didn't, you know what? I'll stop there. Like, let me not get on my soapbox, but like, it didn't consider a lot of things.
Yeah, it didn't.
And, right? And so the only way, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. And the only way, go ahead. Break that down.
Yeah, no. I was going to say the only way that I have found credibly to try and address those things, right? To like navigate around those things, understand how they work within specific contexts, and then build a path forward is by understanding how humans' brains work and how human behavior works and how that comes to be. That's the only way that I found around it. So
yeah. And I totally agree with you because I do equity, diversity, inclusion work from a different lens from you, but we have some similar nuances that kind of intertwine with each other. And I've been doing this work before. It was called equity, diversity, inclusion, honestly. Because I was out in the community. I was building programs, building a pipeline relationship, doing training, all this other stuff. And from a training standpoint, when I used to go in and whether it be to a white audience, a Latino audience, a mixed crowd, Black crowd, I find that in order for change to come, I had to help them think, feel, or see something differently. For the and have an emotional connection to it that allows them to move to action. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sorry, please go ahead.
No, go ahead. And
I was gonna say that like that's exactly it. And the thing that fascinates me about that is the ways in which the person from whom a message is coming can affect the way in which that message is perceived. And so as a result, you want to also take into consideration what the sort of cognitive friction and cognitive biases and psychological biases that exist within the audience might be, so that you can course correct, you can control for the ways in which they're going to inevitably translate what you share with them. So like there's like a very interesting interplay when it comes to just sharing your message and making sure that it's received and making sure that it's remembered, which is like another thing I will get on my high horse about. I literally that's a soapbox I will die on. Please.
Yeah, and I totally agree, and that's why when I'm training, I had to read the room and get a little bit of knowing your audience, right? So
exactly.
I'm going to connect a certain message about youth programming, and there's no parents in there. I'll have to tweak the message, but if there's parents in there, I can speak to somebody who's a parent and tell a powerful story about a child and a parent that's going to help move the needle. But the people who aren't parents, they're probably not going to resonate with that. So that the message is going to get lost. So I need to find another way to reach that part of the audience so that they get the message. And so maybe they can relate to the student part. So the power is telling from the message from a student perspective, right?
Yeah.
And that's resonate and relate to that.
Yeah. And that's brilliant. Like that's a brilliant and like really clear way to describe it, right? Like the genius is in being able to pick which story to tell, right? And what facet of that story is going to be the most impactful given where you are and given what your goals are. So yeah, absolutely. And I love that is something that you use in your work when you're talking to people who are like in the room with you, right? And you're right. I'm seeing a lot of similarities. I mean, obviously I help people do it like digitally across the expanse of the online world, but yeah, it works in a lot of similar ways. The dynamics are very similar.
Yeah. So, if only I can get to your level of genius and know how to tell that story digitally, but that's what I got you for. So I'm not even going to try.
No, literally. No, look, that's what I'm here for. We're already Niger siblings. Like, nah, you got me. That's what I'm for. Amazing.
So let's talk about your career journey here a little bit. Were you like, what was the path that you took? Like, how did you get into your current business and career? Like, because we know for sure this is not how you started, but this is how you ended.
No, this is how I ended. Yeah. So, okay. So, where does one start with a journey like this? Okay. So I have been a tech nerd ever since I was born. Okay. Like I will preface the story by saying that. I think I built my first computer when I was like 8 or 10, something like that, like stupidly young. Yeah. And to be clear, before you hail me as some sort of genius, it wasn't because I was just like, oh, let me build a computer one day. It was literally because there was a video game I wanted to play and my current computer couldn't handle it. It was like not strong enough to handle this game. And so I was like, hey, Mom, Dad, you got me this game. Will you get me a new computer so that I can play this game? And they were like, no, 8-year-old child, we will not get you a new computer to play this game. So I was like, all right, bet. Will you get me the materials I need to build a computer so I can play this game? And they're like, I mean, sounds educational, I guess. Sure. Yeah. And so they did. And so I built my first computer. And I did that again because there was a game I wanted to play. Like there was something I was really obsessed with. And that was the thing that was going to get me through all the difficulty and the trial and error of putting this computer together. Wow. And so that's sort of like, that part of my life has sort of traveled in tandem, in parallel with whatever it was that I did in school. So if I was in school studying, like when I was an undergrad, if I was in school studying philosophy and religion and Japanese, of all things, I was always working to support myself as someone who was doing tech, right? So in undergrad, my job was, I was a science technician. Sorry, I was a student technician. And I did IT for the school, right? Like that's how I paid for like my books and my food and like all of that stuff, right? But while I was in school, I was studying something very, very different. So it was just like a weird, like parallel tracks that happened throughout my life. And so, I remember in undergrad, I studied philosophy, like I said, but nowadays it's something that people would probably call neurophilosophy. So it's like the study of like what the mind is from like a neuroscience perspective, right? So I studied that. I studied political theology and I studied Japanese, again, because I was a nerd and I was just like, well, I want to learn this language. And then by the end, I got an accidental major, right? So like I was that kind of person. And so the thing that kept happening to me is that I would study abroad and a conflict would happen. Right. So like I remember my freshman year, a program I was part of took us to Russia. And it was not long like after that Russia and Georgia like were having their conflict, right? I remember my sophomore year, I went to Japan not too long after there was like the Fukushima meltdown. I lived in Cairo for some time and I left basically the week of the Arab Spring, right? Like the protests in Tahrir Square that blew up. And so those experiences were sort of my awakening into realizing that I wanted to somehow be part of social progress. I wanted to somehow be part of pushing the world towards a place that was less poisonous for others. Right. And that is what eventually got me into conflict resolution and mediation, which is what I went to grad school for. So I went to Israel, studied. I got my master's in international conflict resolution and mediation. While I was there, Israel had their conflict with Gaza, so I was there in the middle of a war, wow. And which again was just very much like it was very on brand for me. Yeah. And while I was there, I sort of did the same thing that I was doing. I was like working in tech, and that work in tech, because, you know, Israel's evidently the Silicon Valley of the Middle East. What? And so I was, yeah. And so I was working in tech to sort of support myself while I was there. And those sort of like tech, connections led me to, an eventual job at Time Out magazine in Israel, where I was, again, doing kind of tech stuff, but I was also helping people like shape how they were going to say what they said, right? Like I helped translate things into like easier to understand language, and essentially what people now know as like copywriting and copy editing and designing layouts and that sort of thing. So it was just like a weird transition from having tech be sort of like this side thing that I was doing, and using those tech skills to help people communicate themselves well and better, to being sort of like my main thing. Like that's kind of what happened. So that's sort of like, I should thread the needle better for people. You're right. I can see it in your face. So this is what I'm going to do. This is a long journey. So I'm going to speed up. I got my master's, right? I came back to the States, was still working for basically all of the organizations that I'd connected to while I was in Israel. So I was using my tech skills to help lots of tiny nonprofits share their message. And then eventually got a job with a giant nonprofit myself, did a lot of anti-bias and anti-discrimination work in education, and then left my job. I left that job. Yeah. And I left that job because it was it 2016 or 2017? But the election happened. And my job was doing a lot of crisis management for all of the crazy bias incidents that exploded all across the state, right? So it was my job to collaborate with the state. It was my job to advise schools when like a kid had a noose or wrote the N-word in a place, or like when swastika showed up it was my job to like help people work through those things. And eventually that ish took its toll. Yeah. And so it was a really rough period. And being on the front lines and not really having a system of care, because I was so young, like it didn't even occur to me that I needed to be caring for myself as I was doing that work. But eventually I got really burnt out, and I was like, you know what, I gotta go. And my supervisor was like, I know, sweetie, like I can see how rough this is for you. So, left that job and left it just yeeted out. Didn't have another plan. I was just like, no, I got to go for my mental health. And, it was awkward because I didn't have options. I didn't have like a job that I was leaving to, but I did have a friend who knew that I was already in the spare time I didn't have, like building websites and putting together marketing systems for nonprofits across the world for free. And so she was like, yeah, you could just, I don't know, charge people for that. Why don't you?
That's a brilliant idea.
Do that? Why didn't you do that? And I was like, oh yeah, I could do that. I could. And so that's how my firm was born. That's how Nobiworks was born. I started Nobiworks. I was like, you know what? This is something that I've already been doing. So I'm just going to keep doing what I've been doing. And so that's how I started. Wow. So that's my like weird convoluted journey to where I am.
It's a beautiful journey, and I can see how the growth over time has allowed you to be the Yoda that you are.
Oh my
The
gosh, yeah.
baby Yoda
Look,
that
all
you
my friends call me Baby Yoda. That's all what all my friends call me. And I'm not gonna lie, it's true. Like I very much am. Baby Yoda is my totem. But yeah, yeah. So and it's interesting because now, like, now I'm not, building websites or doing graphic design. Like now I don't do that. I advise people on making choices, right? But
Yeah.
having that period of time where that was all I did forced me to develop a theory of practice. And I think that this is something that if I had to go back and advise my younger self, I would definitely tell her, hey, like, there's going to be a lot of trial and error here. This is not going to be easy. Like, people make starting up a business and like just being able to support yourself immediately, they make it sound easy. It is not going to be easy. Focus on your theory of practice. Focus on your perspective when it comes to what it is that you're doing. Focus on the tools and the strategies that you are using in your own head to be able to do your job. Focus on consolidating those things, because those things are what is going to set you apart when you get clearer about what it is that you want to do. And so because I think I would have come to like the brand scientist and like what I do now a lot sooner if I'd been focused on developing that theory of practice, that intellectual property. But I wasn't. I was just focused on like, okay, can I pay rent? Can I, can I afford food? Right? Like, I wasn't even focused on that. I was just like, no, I got to be able to feed myself.
And it's such a tough balance because one hand, if you had the luxury of not paying rent, you could focus on that, but you have to pay bills and you have to sustain. I have a day job that pays the bills, but as I build this thing, and I bring people aboard, I have to start thinking about, okay, I have to pay such and such and such and such, and this is actual. This podcast is the actual business, so I have to have some level of income to pay the people, or else I have to do everything myself, which I don't have that time.
Exactly, and literally can confirm, because when COVID happened, right? I moved back with my parents. I moved back in with my parents.
Oh, Lord.
And that was a trial. Let me tell you, that was a trial. And to be fair to myself, I moved back in with my parents at my father's request, right? My father, he is, amongst other things, a consultant for World Health, right? And so he had actually been sent with a team, I want to say in like maybe March of 2020, maybe.
Yeah.
But the WHO had sent him with a team to China, to Wuhan, to figure out what was going on. And when he came back, I've never seen my father legitimately afraid, right? Because he's like a really mellow guy. He's not an alarmist. I think if I had to compare him to something, he'd be like a koala, right? Like just a very professorial koala, like real mellow and like, right? Like that guy. Yeah. But when he came back, he was legitimately afraid. And so he reached out to all of us and he basically was like, hey, anyone who's not working in a lab right now, I need you to move back home. I need you to cancel any of your international trips, and I need you to move back home. And at the time, no one knew what COVID was. No one like it was like a twinkling on the fringes, right? And so we were all like, bruh, like what's, sir, what's going on? But because we had never seen him like that before, we were like, okay. So me and my brother, not my youngest, but the middle brother, we moved back home. My kid brother worked in a lab, so he couldn't leave. And basically I've been here. Like I've been here. And so I haven't had to pay rent, right? I've just been saving up that money and either reinvesting it back into my business or saving it for other things. And like, I cannot stress to you how much that has helped with how my business has progressed. And it's not fair. It's not fair, right? Because I know that there are people who are building their businesses and they don't have that luxury. But I also want to point out that a lot of the big businesses that we think of now as successes, you know, the Amazons and the Apples of the world, they started in like their parents' garage, right? Like they don't really talk about right? They don't talk about those times where they lived on cup noodles and lived in their parents' house. Like they like, no, we got here on our own, right? But like, no, they were living with their parents. And that's why, and so I say that to say, if you feel like you're not where you should be yet, be patient with yourself. Because the folks who are where you want to be have had advantages that maybe you didn't have. And that's going to account for your pace and your trajectory and when you get to where you're trying to go. So be patient with yourself. I think that's probably the thing that I have learned the most over time, that as impatient as I am, be patient. Yeah.
And I say, and I'll echo that sentiment, be patient with yourself. And also along the way, I think, which I feel like you've done is you've, stayed present in the moment. And it seems as if you enjoyed the journey as well. Like you don't beat yourself up for not knowing what you don't know. But when you get there, you say, aha, okay, like that here's where I can make a pivot or change or tweak, right? And so I love the whole story framework you share. The other framework that I want to highlight is the importance of self-care, mental health. See, a lot of people think sometimes they have to be stoic, they have to be strong, or they have to be this thing, or sometimes, especially us as Blacks, Africans, Nigerians, we tend not to put as much emphasis on our mental health, right?
Absolutely.
And I tell people, mental health is like, you've been on the plane, right? When the oxygen mask comes down, what do they tell you?
Oh yeah.
When the oxygen mask,
take care of yourself first. You got to put your mask on first, and then put it on the kid.
And I know for some of us that seems like, oh, that's selfish. Like I want to take care of my older mother, the kid, and so forth. But what if you pass out while you're trying to do that? Then you're no good for anybody. The same thing with your mental health and taking care of you in your business and in life. If you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to be the best version of yourself to then impart that wisdom, those skills, those gifts, everything that you need to be in that moment to progress family in that time.
1,000%. And I can't stress this enough, because again, this is a tendency that we have as people of color, as Black people especially, as immigrant kids especially, that like you grind and then you die, right? Like that's that's what you grew up with, right? But the fact of the matter is, like, your mind is the soil from which your success springs, right? Like, and if the soil is dry and busted and doesn't have the nutrients that it needs, like, you're going nowhere. And that's I'm not saying that metaphorically. I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm being very literal, and I'm talking about this from a scientific perspective, right? Like, if your mind is not right, you're not going anywhere. So you have to be able to care for your mind, and ultimately also for your body, because that's what houses your mind, right? You have to be able to care for yourself, because that's the only way that you're going to survive the trials and tribulations and the climb and the grind sometimes that it's going to take to get where you need to go. So,
Like, you're speaking my language now. You're speaking my language. So
Oh
another
my
question
gosh.
I usually like to ask people, just to really highlight the trajectory of career growth and how that happened, because people, it's not where you start, it's how you finish. Like we said earlier, what was your first job? What was your first job? Was the marketing company your first job, or what was your first job?
Yeah, that's a good question. The first job that I was paid for is I think was the job that I had in college. I'd worked unpaid. Don't send Chapel Director Services, but like I had worked unpaid, like to help my mom like around her office and that sort of thing, right? So like when they had tech issues, I was like officially the tech for the office. I wasn't paid for it, but like I did the tech stuff at the office. And every now and then her team will still call me to be like, something's going on, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, I guess I'll help. But that was like my first job, but I wasn't paid for it. So my first like real job that I was paid for would be that job that I had in college, where I was an IT person. So like I'd sit in the library and folks would come to me and say like, my computer's doing this, or I'm locked out of my account, or like, can you take a look at this? And I would fix their computer or whatever their tech issue happened to be. So that was my first job. And yeah.
See,
and that eventually led to
from IT helper to brand scientist. You never know where life will take you. So
absolutely. And I have to say, I've been really really fortunate, I think, in my journey, in that like I had enough self-trust to take an unexpected detour when I felt like it would lead to something, right? And that's not always something that's fostered in us. I wish it were. Yeah. That sort of like instinct to be like, you know what, I'm going to trust my instincts here and try this weird thing. I'm not quite sure where it's going to go, but like I'm going to follow that, because that's led me to a lot of like the insane opportunities that I've had. Case in point, I had a co-alum reach out to me like on LinkedIn years and years ago, just to sort of say, hey, like I saw that you worked at this place. I would love to like talk to you and hear more about what you do, all of this sort of stuff. And I was sort of like, okay, right? Like I didn't know this girl from Adam. Like I didn't know her at all, but I was like, you know what? Like, let me just talk to her. I don't know where this will lead. And I'm not trying to be like a teacher or anything or a mentor, but let me talk to her. Yeah. So I spoke to her, was able to connect her to some people. She then connected me to an organization that I had my eye on since I was in college, right? It just so happened that she had the inside track there because she'd been an intern. And so when she heard about my work, she's like, you know who you should connect with? You should connect with these people. And I was like, oh, say more, right? And say more, right? And so she, just because I was like, you know what, let me talk to her. Like it won't cost me anything to give her like 10 minutes of my time. She connected me to this organization, to the person that she knew on the inside. Those people brought me on as a fellow, right? And because of my time as a fellow there, I now get to say that I advised the first refugee delegation to the UN. Ooh. I now get to say that I advise the High Ambition Coalition, which is a coalition of the world's most climate ambitious nations. In fact, the US just rejoined this year, and Obama gave us kudos, right? I can say that. I can now say that I have advised parties in the middle of a civil war, right? Like I can say all of these things, these crazy things that like, what? Right? And these are things that like add to my credibility now, because like I have done this work at such a high level that folks are like, oh, cool. You applied like social psychology and branding stuff, like in super high stakes situations where literally like there's lives on the line. Cool. Okay. I think I can trust you with my nonprofit. I think I can trust you with my business. I think I can trust you with my image as a public figure, right? Like because of those experiences. Right. And that ish would never have happened if I hadn't been like, you know what, let me give this random girl who I've never met in my whole life, like 10 minutes of my time. Mm-hmm. And so like, I've had lots of weird things like that happen to me that have led to like these incredible experiences that now I can sort of say, hey, I did this.
I love
So
that.
yeah.
And see, this is why, I tell people, like, you could, if you could give 5 minutes just to talk and learn somebody's story, give it. If you don't, if you don't want to connect with that person, that's fine as well too. Like, because I know sometimes people, it's about energy. And
Yeah.
I told people, somebody was like, they was on social media, it was like, and they just felt the need, they had to say all these different things to certain people that they see scrolling in the timeline. I'm like, you don't even know this person. Like, it costs you nothing. Pay if you don't like it, it's fine. It costs you nothing. Pay them no mind.
Yeah, exactly. And so and that's the thing, like everybody is somebody,
Yeah.
right? Everybody is somebody. It takes very little to just be generous to other people, right? Like to be kind, right? And I found that being generous and kind has led me on a lot of my craziest adventures, right?
Yeah.
Like that, like that's how all of these crazy things that I talked about that now I can say that I've done happened. It's how I got my job at like Time Out magazine, of all the magazines in Israel. That's how I got that job, right? Every crazy, unimaginable thing that I have done was preceded by me just sort of being generous and kind to the people around me. And
being
that
willing to be
budded
open to
into...
it and taking chances too. I'll add that. And
Exactly.
so hold on. In all these
Exactly.
crazy journeys and the journey of life that you've been on, business, professional, personal, what is one good lesson life has taught you?
That's a good question. There's so many. There's so many,
All I
but I
need
think
is one.
I know you just want. So I'll say this one because this one has been on my mind. And it's this: don't be satisfied with disrupting the present. Look towards shaping the future.
Mm.
And I this is something that I've constantly reached for, to like pull my mind out of the resource game, right? The sort of like, okay, these are the resources we need. We want to make this much in revenue, like in order to do this, that, and the other thing, right? Like the sort of like inflexible mindset that like keeps me focused only on like the numbers and how we're doing, and like that mindset, that's keeping me focused on disrupting the present, right? Making sure that like we're good right now, making sure that my clients show up in the media right now, right? Like that's narrow.
Mm-hmm.
If I think towards, how do I shape the future? How do I make the future something that I want my kids to live in? I want my great grandkids to live in. What can I be doing right now to be sowing the seeds for that? And what can I be doing for my clients that gives them that level of respect and influence so that they can get into the rooms that matter to them? They can get into the rooms where it happens. If I'm going to quote Hamilton, and I will. Right? Like, what's the work that's not going to be the pretty busy work that gets you to spark right now and gets eyes and visibility on you right now, but is actually going to cement your legacy in the future? That's actually going to, when you look back, when other people look back, they'll say, oh, this is why we're here now.
So it's crazy that you say this, because I've been in that headspace too, and so although people look at this podcast as a now thing, I look at it as a future thing, because we're documenting people's life experiences, journey, story, values, and great pieces of content. And so from this, like I'm talking to my team saying, hey, this is Black history in the making. We need to like turn this into a book and a series that we could package that could be cemented for the future. So when we're gone, it's here for like who's documenting the Black history of the future, right? Like
yes. Oh my goodness, yes, 1,000% this. It's kind of like when are we going to have Black Futures Month, right? Instead of Black History Month, that we get Black Futures Month by documenting the Black present. Yeah. And I think that's brilliant that is the perspective that you have on this, right? Because having this archive, this treasure trove of what Black minds are doing now means that in the future we have something to look back on to say, oh, this is how we got here. This is how we got to this place. Mm-hmm. And we will never be able to understand that journey and then be able to replicate it if we don't have the documentation of it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's so brilliant. I love that that's the perspective that you have. Yeah. And that's what we're friends now.
That's what's been resonating. So like it was like I was like, oh my God, like what she said is so resonating with me now because this is what I've been saying with like, and I was like, how does little me start to create the Black future? Because like everything, like so many stories that have come on, including yours, I've met people who built a process in their company or maybe sold off the patent to it, and it was owned originally by a Black person, right?
Yeah.
Or they did something that was started up by a Black person, but you will never hear about it anywhere else because that company's not going to go and preach that. Oh, that was this the person, but
the actual genius was this guy, right? No. No, of course not.
And I get to learn that history here in conversation with just all these different amazing, Black and Pan-African people. And I was like, man, this story needs to like be documented as history, like, because this is amazing. And we need to be, the future generation needs to be able to see this too, even if they don't have this podcast. Like maybe it'd be in a book form story. So me and you gonna talk offline.
Yeah, absolutely. I was like, we're friends now. Like, you can't escape me. Oh my God, you had me from Niger parents. Like a
bond that every Nigerian child shares.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my
God. In hearing about your work, like what I mean, because you're tech, you're a little bit like what industry do you consider yourself in, like, or like how would you describe your industry? Because I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say that I sort of sit at the intersection of like brand strategy and like marketing science, maybe.
Okay.
I think that's probably like what I would say. And so branding, kind of.
Okay.
Branding, kind of. Okay. And yeah, so that's what I would say. And it's rough again, because like I've combined a bunch of things that generally don't go together, like branding, equity, and science, and I put them together into this thing that I now call brand science, right? So it's hard because it intentionally occupies its own space. But if I had to like tell you what the constituent parts were, the bits that made it up, I would say like, yeah, branding, creative direction, brand strategy, marketing science. And then if I had to like draw in all the other sciences, it would be like behavioral science, neuroscience, all of those things. And it's like a combination of all of those things and social justice theory.
Right,
exactly.
So we're going to inspire somebody who's going to hear this and be like, ooh, I'm trying to do what all of that resonates with me. Some little girl or some little boy is gonna hear this, or somebody in that midlife crisis in their job and hasn't followed their passion. They hear this. Um, what's some advice you would give to somebody who wants to start a career in your industry as a branding, marketing, scientist kind of guru? Like, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So I would say that, you know what? I said that this was going to come back full circle, didn't I?
Yeah.
I would say make sure that it is something that you will be obsessed with. Um, and and you can find whatever your obsession in this field is in a lot of different ways. It can be the folks that you work with. It can be the actual science part of it and the research that you get to do, getting literally paid to learn, which I'm winning because I do. It can be the actual development of strategy, or maybe it's working with creative and art, right? Like there are so many different fascinating facets of this work that you can decide is going to be your obsession. And I would say don't get into something quite this interdisciplinary unless you have that obsession and it's going to propel you forward. Because I'm not gonna lie, like it is hard out here in these streets. Like being a small business owner is not easy. But the thing that keeps me going is that I'm obsessed with behavioral science. Like I'm obsessed with understanding how the human mind works. I just eat that stuff for breakfast. I'm always reading these articles, and I'm doubly obsessed with using that information to push social progress, right? Like, can you imagine like a predictable scientific approach to making social progress happen? That's what I'm working towards. Love that ish. That stuff is going to keep me going forever. And so if you can find what that thing for you is, do that before you get into this. That's what I would say. And it's not going to be super crystal clear when you start, but you should have an inkling before you go in, and it's going to get clearer as you go along. So that's what I would say. Pick an obsession and let that guide you.
Yep, I love it. I love it. I couldn't agree more. And and you'll find when you hit those inklings, just rewind back to the inklings of of us. Like, you know what, girl? This is when the magic happens, when you hit those inklings. Yes, yes, and yes.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
What does the future have in store when you look at your industry and the work that you're doing? What do you think the future has in store? What does it look like?
Yeah. Okay. So this is where I have to temper my pessimism, perhaps. I have to temper my pessimism, and I will try to be even-handed when I talk about this. But so I think the future for maybe like empirical approaches to branding and marketing and advertising and the whole gamut of stuff that exists in that sphere. I think that we're going to continue to see more of what I call diversity theater, right? So lots of large organizations sort of saying like, we care about POCs, haha, right? Like we're going to see a lot of that. And I think that it's going to frustrate some people. I understand that. But I think that that's also an opportunity that folks like you and me can sort of take to insert ourselves into those rooms where it's happening, right? And so I think that hand in hand with the fact that there's going to be more of this diversity theater, I think there's also going to be more opportunities for folks like you and me to sort of to leave our mark, not only on the field, but again on the status quo, on like the the lives that we're all living. If that makes sense. So I think that's where things are going. I think that as more and more folks like you and me get involved, there are going to be new perspectives that come out, like new weaknesses in the ways in which things are currently done. They're going to start coming to the fore, right? So for me in the work that I do, it's targeting this thing I call the invisibility tax, right? Which is difficulties that folks like you and me have positioning ourselves as authorities in our fields, right? Like that's a phenomenon. That's something that I have observed and is something that I am now researching and looking into backing up with behavioral science, like finding out the root cause of that, right? And I think that they're gonna be more innovations like that, right? That suddenly someone like you or me has an opportunity to like pop their head up into like these rooms where decisions about how the world is going to be happens. They're going to get an opportunity to pop their head in, and they're going to see like what's wrong in a way that the folks who've been there for a while aren't going to see. And I think that that's going to lead to some innovations down the line. So those are the two things that I see happening. Unfortunately, all of that comes with, not unfortunately, it's kind of both. Tech is going to continue to advance. People are going to continue to use it to, manipulate and take advantage of people. That's something that's going to continue to grow. But hopefully the people like us who sort of, again, pop our heads in are going to be able to offset some of that ugliness with the things that we're able to bring to the table. So that's what I see.
Yeah. And one thing that I'll add to that is with, I see some of the same things. And another thing that's opened my eyes is I watched this documentary called Coded Bias. And if we solely think tech is the solution, we have to look at who's making the tech. Because
exactly,
the tech can have bias written into it.
Exactly. No, it it literally does have bias written into it, and that's sort of why I said I gotta temper my pessimism. But that's 100% what is happening, right? That and the reason that I think it's so important, like I keep doing this, people can't see, but I keep doing this where I have like little fingers popping above to like, oh, that's what's happening up here, right? You're like, oh, hey. Exactly. And the reason I think that is so important is because like a lot of technological advances, code and big data and the ways in which we are now using it have been developed with the biases of the people who developed them, right? So you look at the internet and like all of the problems that we see coming up with the way that the internet works today, that's because of the biases and blind spots of folks who developed the internet, right? If the internet was developed from the perspective of the most marginalized, the ways in which it now has, ugly divisiveness and the ways in which it isn't optimized for folks with different abilities, and like all of the problems that we're now discovering with the internet would have been built into the way that it was built. But it wasn't, right? And we're seeing the same sort of thing happening with big data and coding and algorithms now, that the folks who are sort of developing these things have their own blind spots and biases, and those things are being written into the algorithms that we're going to be using for the next 100 years. And so that's why I think that it's really important that hand in hand with that, there are also opportunities that are popping up for folks like you and me to sort of pop our heads into these rooms and be like, oh, hey, by the way, this, right? And that's, again, because of this diversity theater stuff that I was talking about. Like, again, it's not necessarily a positive that, people are sort of saying, we care, even if their practices don't show that. But because that is something that they feel obligated to do, inviting us into those rooms comes hand in hand with that. And that's when our opportunity to sort of come in and try to right the ship appears.
Absolutely. So I love that. All right. So let's, because me and you, we could probably talk forever. But I try to keep these podcasts what used to be a drive time. I don't know what people are, but now I guess it's make your coffee, read a couple emails time. I don't know. People's morning routine.
Eat your breakfast. Take your kids to school. Get back home.
So let's end off like this. What projects are you currently working on, and where can people find you?
Yeah, okay. So I've got two fun things that are going on. Right now, I am continuing my research on the invisibility tax that I told you about. And so I'm doing lots of qualitative interviews so that I can gather as much data as possible so I can describe this phenomenon and sort of share strategies for how to navigate around it. It's a core part of the work that I do. So that's one project. The second one is that every month, my business and we will do a workshop. And so we do a workshop on, I think this month it's called 3 Simple Science-Backed Ways to Make Your Brand Impossible to Ignore. Like it's something like that, right?
You gotta let us help you promote that. I want all my people to attend. Come on. Send me links, like whatever we gotta do, we want to be part of it.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Thank you so much. So yeah, those are the 2 primary things that I'm doing. If that is something that interests you or feels like it would help your enterprise, absolutely come. The link will probably be in the show notes. And yeah, that's essentially it. If you want to find out more about my work or hear more of the insights that I'm discovering as I'm doing my research, feel free to follow us on Instagram. So that's @Nobiworks, or on LinkedIn. You can also go to our website.
Awesome. And don't worry, if you are driving or you eating your breakfast, you ain't got no plane close by, I'm going to put all this in the show notes. I'm going to get it from her, and we're going to make sure that we highlight it. And we're going to continue to, I almost want to guarantee that it's not the last time you're going to hear us working together.
Yeah, I can pretty much guarantee that myself. I once I'm like, oh, we're friends now. Like once that switches in my mind, like, unfortunately, you cannot escape me. So take it or leave it. That might be a positive, but yeah, we'll be working together.
And big shout out to my girl Pam, who introduced us and got this thing together. Like she was right in every essence. Oh, you gotta meet the home girl. You gonna get along just fine. And it's been a long time coming, but we finally made it happen.
We finally did, and I'm so proud of us. And absolutely shout out to Pam because she was 100% right. I was like, "Who's this person?" And no, she was right. She was right. Because
look, she didn't know. She's like, wait, you Nigerian? Like, I forget when we was in conversation. I was like, yeah. Of course, Terrell's not my Nigerian name. Adekunle is my Nigerian name.
Nobi is my Nigerian name. Yeah.
So wait. Where did this Chloe come from?
So that was just my mom. She gave us all like vaguely French sounding English names that we could use if we ever wanted to. And I find myself using it in various like situations. So So when I'm introducing myself to like strangers, I'll be Chloe. Yeah. But for my friends and family, most of them call me Nobi, which is like the short of my Nigerian name, and it's also where my business gets its name, Nobiworks. Yeah. That's my Nigerian name. It means beauty in the heart. Nigerian names all mean something. Yeah. And so it means beauty in the heart, and Nobi is heart. So
and for those who are wondering what Adekunle means, it means wealth is around me. So, and I do have a wealth of knowledge just around me with every podcast that I do.
Oh, that's a good name. That's a good name.
You know what I also love too, like how Nigerians they always shorten names, like everybody has a short name. So like if you go down my siblings, like we got Ade BC, we call him BC. Titi Layo, we call her Titi. Olu Tosin, we call her Tosin. Ade Bimbola, we call him Bimbola. Or his friends outside of this call him Ade.
Ade, yeah. I've heard Ade. I was like, I definitely have heard Ade. Yep. That's so funny. No, it's the same. It's the same. Like for me, Mad Nobi, they call me, like folks call me Nobi. My brother, Tobenna, they call him Toby. Yeah. My kid brother, his name is the longest name. It's Kamsio Chuko Eluka, and they call him Kamsi. Like,
yeah, nobody's gonna say that whole name either.
No. They'll be like, how many consonants was that? I'm sorry, what? Too many consonants, not enough vowels. I get it.
Oh, I love it. Oh, so with that, ladies and gentlemen, we end another episode like just like we do, because we started as family in the beginning. We will end off like as family. So join us for the workshop when it comes out. Any last words of wisdom for the people?
Yes, I will say this. So it is not a small truth that the world that we live in has been set up to exploit people like us. That's not fake news. That is real, right? But at the same time, I personally refuse to be terrorized by the state. I refuse to be terrorized by what society refuses to give me or cannot give me, right? Because what am I gonna die? Like, what am I going to do, right? And so I think that this is like a really interesting tension that people, it's like in our field kind of face, right? That like the world is unfair and the deck is stacked against you, right? Like that is true. And then also holding at the same time that like, I can't stop anyway. Like I can't let that stop me. Right. And so I want to hold that both of those things are true. You can believe both of those things. And not be a hypocrite, not be somebody who is double-minded in their ways, right? Both of those things are true. So hold both of those things, and don't forget to sprinkle, like we said earlier, a bit of self-care in there as well, because that's how you're going to be able to hold both of those things on your journey.
Love that. Words of wisdom, ladies and gentlemen. Words of wisdom. So with that, we want to take it out because there's nothing I could do to make that even better than what it was already is.
Well, thank you, honestly, for letting me talk at you for such a long time. I'm really flattered and pleased to be here. Thank you for having me.
It was my pleasure. My pleasure. Chloe, ladies and gentlemen. All right. With that being said, we're going to close out, and we will see you next time.